Heidi Metro, thank you so much for joining the We Rise podcast. I'm so excited to have you on today. Will you introduce yourself and let folks know who I have the joy of speaking to today?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. These opportunities are so exciting. And I have a coaching program called Lead from Within. I'm a BodyMind coach, and I work with really high achieving women who are navigating this place of like, I used to do it that way and that doesn't work anymore, but now what do I do? And I also am part of what's called the Keystone Collective here in my own community, where we are agents of change and we are really committed to social justice and equity work and bringing more best practices to our community. So I'm excited to share those things with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear. So thanks again so much for joining. So, that there's so many people I know are engaged both in, have their hand in the business world, the family world, but the community world. And it's a lot to hold. And there's a lot happening in the world these days. You tell us a little bit more, if you'll, weave those strands together for us a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about your coaching work and a little bit more just about your background and your story to how you got where you are now.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Yes. So I love how you talk about weaving strands, because that definitely is what it feels like.
Right?
And it is a lot to manage. But I think if I've learned anything, especially over the last several years, it's that when you are in communion with your values, it makes decision-making easier. And so like I have my own personal values, but we also have our family values, and I've got my business values, and we have our Keystone Collective values. And so it's like, as long as I'm in harmony, as long as I'm in communion with those pieces, it's much easier to say yes and no to things. There's an element of discernment. And so inside my coaching world, that really started, well, gosh, I feel like I've been a coach my whole life. Like I literally was a coach. That was one of my jobs. But I have a background in philosophy. So I like to learn how people think. I want to know what's informed their choices. Where does this come from? But I also have a background in massage therapy. And so BodyMind coaching is really the blending of the two, and bringing my coaching experience and interest into our Keystone Collective has really helped to provide a structure to the work that we're doing. So, and I'm married, I've got 3 kiddos. And so we are our own community as well.
all the things that are beautiful and full. So you talked a little bit, Heidi, about values and being in alignment with values. Can you tell folks a little bit more about what that looks like for you? How do you help folks, in what is often a noisy space or crowded days, or people who have visions and goals of what they want to achieve, whether that's through the Keystone Collective or in your own individual work? How do you help folks? Can you walk us through a little bit more about what that looks like to actually discern what those values are? And is it a process of stilling the self to hear, or what does that look like?
I think stilling is one aspect of it. I think most people actually know what their core values are, but they are living in accordance to their should values, because we think of values as, it's a pretty charged word, where we think of it as, morally based, or we think of it as that you have to prove. So common should values are things like responsibility, and I need to be professional, and I have to be on time. And there are lots of values that we live by that might, yes, keep things going, but they're not that like soul-filled thing. And so inside of my coaching world, we call them strategies with soul. It's actually the name of a show that I have that you get to be on, and I'm so excited.
I'm so excited for that.
Yay, for a collaboration.
No, absolutely.
Yes. Collaboration's a core value. And so it matters to meet people and be inspired by them and bring them together. And I didn't realize collaboration was a core value until probably 2 years ago. And once I started living in accordance with it, so many opportunities showed up. So with clients, I walk them through several different exercises to kind of, well, it's basically like a weeding process. If you think of your values as like a garden, a lot of people have weeds in that garden, and it takes some some really, you're going to get dirty when you're doing some values work. You're going to get plucked by the thistle. You're going to be really maybe surprised at what's actually growing in your garden. Yeah. And I find gardening is more fun with people that you love and trust. And so I like to walk people through so that they're living from that core place. It feels different when you're in harmony versus when you have to prove yourself.
Yeah. In what ways? Can you say more about that? What it feels like, and when you work with people who discover what it's like to live from that place, what is that like?
Well, the majority of the people that I work with are high achieving women, where it's like, and a couple of enlightened men, right? Like there's room, but it's typically high achieving women. And there's a certain posture that comes with high achieving women where we tend to, like, you're the ones who get it all done. You are the list makers, and you have a to-do list, and you have a binder of all the things, and you've got color coordinated everything, and everything gets done, but there's a physiology of tightness. And you feel like you have to. When you have to do something, when you have to be a good mom, when you have to be a good partner, when you have to be successful, when people show up with a should value of success, oh man. And then you realize what they really want is freedom. Yes. Their whole body shifts. And that's the essence of BodyMind coaching, is how does it feel? Core values feel lighter. Core values create spaciousness. Most I work with have like a tightness in their chest or like the weight of the world on their shoulders. And when we start to really, I think of it as like it is a refining. And as they refine, they release stress from their physical body. It's amazing. Yeah. It's the most fun. It's the best work.
Oh, that's so neat. And so as this shedding or refining is happening, I imagine there is a lightness of being. Do you experience that in the women that you coach and the few men that you coach, that there is a shift that you see in their being? What does that look like in terms of, that process of working with people and that body-mind connection? Because I guess just one thing, Heidi, I want to mention, I love to move and to dance and do yoga, but it took me a long time. It took until I was 40 until I realized the body is always in the present moment, and all the things I have been doing up here for so long in my head, for those of you who are listening, I'm gesturing to my brain that it's really in my body. And it is, my body is always in the present moment and telling the truth. So for people who might not have that experience of being able to let the body lead, because it's not part of our culture in everyday sense, what does that look like for you in the folks you coach? What do you notice?
Well, such a beautiful question. And I think it's one of the reasons I really recommend doing this work with a coach, because it can be a really uncomfortable process. When you, and it's really, most women, they come to me for a couple of things. They want clarity, they want confidence, and they want direction. And I'm like, awesome. You don't get clarity without confusion. Right. You don't get confidence without feeling totally ridiculously ill-prepared. And you don't get direction until you really allow yourself to feel lost. And so to your point, when you're like, the body's always in the present moment, when you can get present, a lot of times it's really uncomfortable. And so it's not this magic process where you're like, gosh, I know what my values are. Now my life is perfect. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really a big mess.
Yeah. Yes.
And so we very strategically, like, I consider myself a hybrid. I consider myself to be very much like, I'm fascinated and totally astounded that we are even alive. It is a miracle that we are here. It is mind blowing that how am I even talking to you right now? Right. I don't know. It's so weird. Right. But I'm also really practical. Sure. I want the strategy. I want the system. I want order. And most of the women I work with want the same thing. And so when we talk about like, there will be discomfort, there will be fear, there will be things that show up, and I'm going to help you as you navigate it. But typically, once they start to live in accordance with their values, they realize that their boundaries are not good.
Right.
And so
Boundary
we do a
work.
lot of boundaries work, a lot of boundary work. There's a
What is
lot
that?
of, but
Yeah.
we attach the word sacred to everything. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, or if you're feeling confused, or if you're feeling overwhelmed, we attach the word sacred because most people will touch it then. If it's sacred irritation, it's a little more palatable where you're like, ooh, I still don't like it. But there's a gift in that that's showing you where you're not congruent with your values, or maybe where you have crossed your boundaries.
Yes.
Other people, I think when you have a boundary established, a lot of people will adhere to that. But if you don't have any, of course they're going to come in, right? There's nuance to that, but
sure. And so how do you define boundaries? I love the way, I'll just preface it by saying on a recent Brene Brown podcast episode, I believe she used someone else's boundary definition, which I'm going to need to look up now, which, very simply is what is okay and what's not okay is the definition of a boundary that was shared. How do you share what a boundary is, and how do you help folks discern those boundaries, which can be difficult?
Yes, it is the hardest work, I think, that I walk people through. She had another definition. She called them big boundaries. And big was an acronym where it was like, boundaries allow me to be in integrity, so in wholeness with myself, and generous to you. And I was like,
love that.
Oh, it's so good, because
so good.
generosity can be tricky because you may think you're being generous and you're actually just crossing your boundaries. So that duality of how do I stay in integrity with myself? And integrity can be a should value, by the way, but integrity from that place of I am remaining whole. I am tending to my wholeness, and I can be this generous with you. So the simplest definition of a boundary at my house. Yeah. And for those of you not watching this, there's a hand gesture, but it's, you like hold up a stop sign and you say, this is as far as I go.
Love that.
And that has been helpful for me because I have tended to cross my own boundaries in an effort to make other people comfortable. And from an unintentionally manipulative place to make myself feel better. So I was living by this adage of, if you're okay, I'm okay. Yeah. And what has shifted is, if I'm okay, it's okay if you're not okay. And feeling like it is your sole purpose to make sure everyone is okay is a recipe for burnout. And most women do that very unconsciously. And I should preface that most women that I work with have been doing that unconsciously.
Yeah, that's so huge. And it's ingrained so much. I notice my own tendency to just get one more thing done for the client, for one of my kiddos, for a family member. And I'm becoming more and more aware, going back to the body is always in the present moment, of what it looks like to notice when I start to feel in my body a little sense of resentment. And that's my warning signal. Oh, wait a minute, it's time to take a walk. Oh, wait a minute, it's time to shut the computer down and go outside, or go paddleboarding, or go for a walk with my family, or play with the dog. And it's interesting that it's taken me a very long time to notice what those internal signals of boundaries are, of where I'm staying in integrity, of still doing the work that I love and find so meaningful. But there has to be an edge where I'm staying, as Lisa Nichols says, filling my cup so it overflows into the saucer. So I'm giving from the saucer. Even what that looks like has taken me a long time to understand what that is. But the feeling in my body has been a really helpful indicator to grow my own awareness. What does that look like?
We call that, we call that the PMS method in my practice. So PMS stands for prioritize, minimize, and systemize. And the prioritize really is, you are blessed to, with consciousness, tend to your purpose, values, and boundaries, which means you need to minimize the guilt and the to-dos and the overwhelm by having systems in place that support you on a soul level. And we talk about, this whole idea of you can't pour from an empty cup, but even that philosophy straight out the gate is really problematic, because it implies that once I fill my cup, I'm supposed to go pour it into everybody else's. And it's like, no, you have your own cup.
I saw your email post recently. I know. I just am remembering that this cup analogy, you have a lot to say about this cup analogy. Forgot about
I have
that.
a lot to
Say
say
more.
about this. I mean, there are expletives. There is a lot of irritation, but that sacred irritation and sacred resentment is what clued me in. Being sacredly, can I say pissed off?
Yes,
is that okay?
You can say pissed off. Yes,
Leave it out if you need to.
pissed
But being sacredly pissed off is different, where it's like, hold up. Because like my kids are lovely humans. But if I have money, of course they're like, can I have some more? Can I have some more? Can I have some more?
Right.
And before you know it, you know, or cookies or, you know, whatever it is. If I don't know my own cutoff point, I can't be upset with them when they've crossed it if I don't even know what it is.
Yes.
But your resentment, your irritation, being pissed off can, exactly what you said is what I teach. Those are the warning signs, and they are a gift because we are human. You are gifted with being irritated. You are gifted with this internal system of knowing when it's right and when it's, hold up, something is wrong. So the phrase we say at my house is, I need a hot minute. I am triggered.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're giving a gift when you say that. You're giving a gift when you say that, because you're letting someone know, whoa, I got to pause. The sacred pause. Terrible.
The sacred pause is huge. Yeah. And it has, if anything, made my relationships stronger. It doesn't mean that everyone has loved my boundaries. It doesn't mean that people have not been disappointed. It doesn't mean that feelings haven't been really hurt and relationships really challenged. And that is, I don't like that part. Yeah. But I also know that I have to live with me 24/7 for the rest of my life. And when I am in wholeness with myself, I am better. I am more generous. I have more to give. Yes. And I also know when I need to rest. Dear God, do we need to rest?
Yes. Dear God, do we need to rest? For sure.
Add in a quote card.
For sure. How do you navigate those relationships and those boundaries? I don't know if you want to go down that. That's a tricky avenue. That's a tricky route, you know, how you create those boundaries and when relationships need to shift, or relationships with people or organizations. You know, what does that look like for you, or how's that look like?
The very first step, and it is the hardest one, and it's the one that most people bypass, is to tell yourself the truth first. Like the hard truth, the whole truth, the email you're never going to send. We call that draft 11 at our house. Like you don't send the 10 drafts. And if you are tempted to respond to something, we also have a newspaper rule. If you wouldn't be proud if it was published on the front page of the newspaper, you never send it. Yeah. And that has saved my butt a lot of times. But telling myself the truth as fast as I can and first, usually for me that looks like writing. Like I just need to write and get it out and say all the things that I would never want anyone to know that I was thinking. Like, I am so mad right now. Like, why does this keep happening? And all of those things are dying literally to be expressed. And then for me, it's like, oh, I'm going to have an uncomfortable conversation. And I always lead those conversations with like, I have to share something with you and I'm super like concerned about it. I'm feeling a little vulnerable, feeling a little some kind of way about it. And in order for us to be in communion, it's got to happen. Yeah. And sometimes I'm looking for resolution. And that means it gets resolved between me and me. And sometimes I'm looking for reconciliation. That's between me and someone else. But I will always get resolution. It just may not include reconciliation. And that is, God, that sucks.
It's hard to deal with that. Yeah.
But that's part of maturation. That's part of growing up. It's part of becoming, dang it, it's leading from within. And it's hard. But what else are we here to do?
Right.
I'm not just going to resent everybody for the rest of my life and then get to be 120 and just pissed off that I wasted my life. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, for sure. This is it. This is the one shot.
This is it.
One shot.
This is it.
For sure. For sure. Beautiful. So, you know, in those those conversations, it sounds like clarity with yourself first, writing things out, giving a voice to those things that haven't been expressed or voiced, finding a way to have, conversations that are difficult. But it sounds like you're clear, Heidi, too, that resolution with yourself is kind of first and foremost.
Always.
That clarity within yourself is what you're leading with. And
because that keeps you in communion with your values.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said. And then you're also naming, it sounds like, what, you're naming that vulnerability, and you're willing to stand in that place of discomfort if need be, and knowing whether reconciliation is something that you're seeking or whether it's just a place to, maybe more attuned within yourself. That's, yeah, beautiful.
And there are often times in that writing process where I realize that this isn't actually about them.
Yeah.
And it's more important for me to process on my own and then go, okay, if we have this conversation now, I'm going to blame you for a whole bunch of stuff that's probably not your fault. So I need a few minutes.
Right.
And if I need to talk with someone, whether it's a coach or a therapist or my husband or God or whomever it might be, I don't like doing it. I'm not seeking it out. I'm not like super pumped to grow like that at all.
Right.
But I do feel more equipped to have space to go, I'm triggered by something, and it's in our relationship's best interest if I take some time to figure out what that is. And as I need to include you in the conversation, I will. But right now I can't, I don't know. Something's off.
Yeah.
It creates a safe space in the relationship, even though it creates discomfort.
Yeah.
But it's way easier than just platitudes. And I don't do fake superficial. It's like my body won't do it. It physically rejects it.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Totally. It's just not even possible. And
it's not anymore. In my 20s, and no problem.
Dish it out, but now not so
totally,
much.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think having children switched that for me, because there's so much minutia
of life, of all the things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I mean, as they grow up, they need you differently. I don't think they need me less, but I do think they need me differently. It's much more emotional now. I'm not, changing diapers, and I don't have all the gear, and we only have one car seat left, and like everyone can tie their shoes. We're in an easier physical season, harder emotional season.
Yeah.
But my bandwidth, I do have limitations. Even though I experience myself as divine too, right? Like we're hybrids. I'm still physical. I'm still human. There's still limits. Dang it.
And you need sleep.
And oh my God, have I tried to live without sleep? My family hates no sleep mama. She blows.
I hear that. I know that brain. So that person-to-person work is hard and rewarding. And it sounds like starting with awareness is really key, knowing when it's time to engage and when it's time to center yourself. If we can expand that a little bit, I'd love to talk a little bit more about your work with community, because so much of our work with communities, mirrors our own work with ourselves and our own work interpersonally, but it's a different scale. So, so if we can, I'd love to just move in that direction and
please
tell us a little bit more about how you're engaged with community, and even to bring it around to this theme of resilience, and feel free to dive into that in whatever direction you want. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're engaged with community, resilience, and why?
Well, the why is it's a non-negotiable in my life right now. Like it's a compulsion almost. It's a calling. It's I feel like I'm being led in a different way. And so I live in the Midwest, and I also happen to be married to a Black man, and we have a mixed family. My kids are white passing is a term I'm learning, and all of those things. But we live about 25-ish miles from where George Floyd was killed. And we live in a predominantly white part of the Midwest. And my husband being a Black man, we've always had conversations about race and about structural racism and systemic racism. But we were having so many conversations behind closed doors. And when George Floyd was killed, we started to bring those conversations to light. We have a YouTube channel called Continued Conversations, and it's 10-ish, I think, episodes of me and Mike just talking, like, what was it like to be called the N-word? And what was it like when people would say, what are you? And how do you talk to your kids about race? And we were not coming at it from a place of expertise. We were not coming at it as a place of like, we know what we're doing. It was more like, oh my gosh. And our community was floored. So Mike, when he's a runner, and we, whenever he goes running, he shares his location with me. And there are certain roads that I don't allow him to run on anymore. He had cars swerving at him. He's been called names. He's had cigarettes thrown at him. And it was like, if you're going to keep running is a life and death thing, unfortunately, as a Black man. And so that story in particular was very enlightening for a lot of our friends in our community. And so Mike took it upon himself to have conversations with our police department, with our mayor, with city council, with our library board, we have a domestic shelter in our town. And he started collecting all of these beautiful people in friendship. And it was this like, I just kept saying, it was so inappropriate, but I was like, it's like you have more boyfriends now. Now you have more girlfriends. Now it's like, you have so many new friends. Like, but he couldn't help himself. And so within the last 6 months, we have started to bring all of these people that he's been in connection together. And we started what's called the Keystone Collective with the idea that in our community, there are so many people that want to do the right thing when it comes to social justice and racial justice. They just don't know what to do. Yeah. So I brought my work as a coach with systems with soul, with values, with all of it. We call them the arch values. So it's action, rest, contribution, and health. Those are our 4 core values of the collective. And so we meet twice a month. I have goosebumps. I'll probably get a little weepy about it because these are like the best of the best people. They are amazing humans and so dedicated to doing the right thing and dismantling systemic racism. But we live in a place where people don't even believe that systemic racism is real. We don't have a race problem. We hear these phrases. Just this past Monday at a school board meeting, 5 of our Keystoners, we call them, gave testimony. And there was a lot of backlash. There was a lot of other people getting up and saying, we don't have racism in this town, and that happens other places, and it's a culture issue. And the need for our work is life and death in my family. And that sounds dramatic because it is. Yeah. But this collection of community members, it is such a humbling group to be a part of, to have a shared mission, shared goals, and it's so vulnerable. And it's watching people lead in the best way. And the impact in the community is like, we're just at the beginning, but it is profound. And there's a sense of like, we were trying to get out of here. We were like, get me the hell out of this town. And then he would just join another board, or someone else would be like, hey, we should do this. And now, damn it, both feet are in.
You're there.
We're in it. Because this is where the work needs to be done.
Yeah. And so what is that? So beautiful work, hard work. The work takes time. And you're facing situations where, people are in different realities about what they see and what they believe. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those first steps have looked like, and how are you approaching folks who live in different realities? I think a big part of community work, at least in my experience, has been that it's been okay for people to have different realities. But it's really hard when people's lives are also on the line, and there's a place where those different realities, there's that nexus, and there needs to be space around that nexus too. But the way that it's approached is difficult. And I love that you use the word sacred, and it is sacred work. And in my experience, that othering doesn't work. Creating a sense of different or other or bad only creates more othering and difference and other and bad. But those early days and weeks and months and in that community building work is so key for laying the foundation for what the long haul looks like. And it is that long haul that it's where the rubber hits the road. What does that look like in terms of the day-to-day work of the Keystone Collective and how you're doing that relationship building and looking at the different realities that folks are living in?
Yeah. From the very beginning, Mike and I were, beautiful question, by the way. Mike and I were very committed to who are we actually talking to? Mm-hmm. And it does make a difference when you are, so we have inward facing goals and outward facing goals. And because I'm in charge of systems, systems of soul, we do everything by the quarter, which makes sense in my brain. And it's really beautiful. And I love a sexy spreadsheet. Like I am that girl. I love all of those things. But we have been incredibly strategic about, we need to gel and coalesce as a group and recognize that we're not all having the same experience, but we all do share very similar goals. And so we have taken the time to have outward help come in and help guide us. So we have done and are in the process of doing work with just like the most incredible woman. And I don't know if I can name drop her or not, but Carol Oliveri is like PhD in this work, and she has come in and helped to guide our group. And there's also this incredible organization in the cities, the Twin Cities area. That's what we call it in the Midwest. It's called Deep Sea Consulting, and it's a diversity company. So our entire group is taking the IDI. It's an intercultural assessment to find out where we are. And then we'll have group coaching and we'll have our own individual coaching as well. And then that information will help Carol to determine how do we strategically go forward when we're outward facing. In the midst of that, we're still looking at who's on the school board, who's in city council, where can we affect change on a micro level by either letter writing or what have you. But right now we're still in that strategic planning. And it's important to know that this group, we're not trying to talk to like the Carols who already have done this work for 20 years. That would be insulting. And we're not trying to talk to people who think this doesn't exist. It's the people who know and love us, who maybe were brought up with the idea that color blindness is the way to go. And that's what they've been doing for the last 20 years in their life. It's the people that want to do the right thing and they don't know what that is. And so our next outward facing role is, how do we serve our community so that the people who want to do the work have access to it? That's really what we're creating.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. So it sounds like there's both inward facing work as individuals, as a collective, looking at where there's, focusing on folks who want to change but don't know how to plug in, and then finding ways for those folks to plug in, but also looking at some of the broader community challenges or opportunities. Where do you envision, what is your hope, Heidi, for the Keystone Collective? What's your hope for, in like a year or 5 years? What is your hope for, I would say, not only your community, but the region, for how things can shift and grow?
It's exciting to think about the ripple effect already. So like Mike was at the school board meeting on Monday night. It was a late meeting. So it was right at bedtime. So both of us were not able to go, but my kids were able to watch the very beginning comments and watched all of these Keystone Collective members give their testimony. I was like, there's Mike, there's Rebecca. Like they knew these people. And so on a micro level, the impact has already been a big deal to my individual family. And there's something like, I'm already proud of the example that has been set for them. In my perfect world, we develop over the next year, we get our systems in place, we get a playbook in place, and there's a Keystone Collective in every town.
Yeah, I love
there's
this.
Keystone Collective headquarters in every state. We have, conferences. We have, like when the world opens, hopefully someday, please, that we would have trainings, like on a town level. We want to be able to have people take the IDI. We would really love the school board to take the IDI. If any of you are listening, we would really help you do that as well.
Yeah. How do people find out? Just quickly, how do people find out more about that? while we're on that?
Yeah. So right now, the Keystone, we are all inward facing. So the website is coming. All of those things are coming. If you want to get in touch with me, you can go to HeidiMetro.com or just look me up on Facebook. The collective has made the conscious choice in this moment to not run faster than we should. It's very easy, especially as a lot of well-meaning white people, to just get to work and go do the do. But there is such a thing like the income, or excuse me, the impact and the outcome, your intention and the outcome. Geez, we're responsible for both.
Yeah.
So even if you didn't mean for it to be racist, or even if you didn't mean for it to be offensive, we don't want to run that risk yet. We want to do the inner work before we do the outer stuff. Yeah. So stay tuned. The website, all of that stuff is coming. It's just premature.
Yeah.
It would be irresponsible to do it now, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you making that distinction and sharing. The IDI is actually what I was wondering curiously.
Oh, sure.
Can you share a little bit more about that specific tool, which sounds like it's really valuable for where you are in the process right now?
So, I mean, I believe that it's just like open to the public. You can take that. We are, I think it's like $25 to take it. And it gives you a range of where you are. So it starts with like denial, polarization, minimization. And then it's like, I think acceptance, and there's another one that I'm forgetting, but it lets you know where you are. And then based on where you are, it gives you action steps to take to get to the next space. Mm-hmm. So if we're assuming that most of the collective is going to be either in minimization or like this acceptance or the next phase, but we have hired someone who is going to come in and actually coach us as individuals as well. So we're going to get like a group, not grade, but a group assessment and then individual assessments. And so this company called Deep Sea Consulting, you could absolutely reach out to them. But even if you just Google the IDI, it will help you to be able to take that. Lots of times people take it through their work. Like we call it a straight job. So if you have a straight job, corporate job, you can ask your HR people about taking them.
Great. Thanks for that resource. It's helpful for folks to know, and we'll certainly share those in the show notes. So talking about the inner work, both within the individual and your hopes for down the road, can you talk a little bit more, Heidi, about your community and region and where you have seen, and feel free to take this into your coaching work and the community of people you work with, or with the Keystone Collective, and what your early learnings have been. Where do you see change? Where do you see resilience growing and the ability for folks? And one of the ways that we define resilience is the ability to, when there's been a setback of some sort, which we all experience those setbacks, whether at the, ecological scale, social, economic, but whatever that setback is, the learning that happens in that setback is what will catalyze the forward growth. And so not just bouncing back, but what does that transformation opportunity look like for people to really grow resilience, to occupy a new space, really, for transformation? So what does transformation and resilience look like in your professional work or your community work with resilience?
When you were asking that question, the first thing that came up was when I had my first son, and everyone was like, well, you got to bounce back. And I was like, I'm sorry, I splatted. I did not bounce. Right. I splatted. And that was it. I was not going to bounce. That did not happen. But what I recognized that happened is when I allowed that to splat, when I allowed the old me to transform into, like, going from maiden to mother is kind of a humongous change. It's a huge transformation. And when I let it just lie, it rooted me differently. And so this work of equity and diversity and inclusion has leveled me. And it would be foolhardy for me to try to bounce. I think of resilience as being broken apart and planting seeds. And that for me gives it, takes the edge off, it takes the pressure off. And I'm in a program right now with Trudy LeBron. And if you don't know who that is, please go look her up. She's got an equity-centered coaching program that I'm taking. And one of the things that we're talking about is like that tension of non-closure. And as a white woman who has been engineered to perform and get an A and be a perfectionist and make sure you graduate with honors and check all of the boxes and you will be happy.
All the things, all the things.
The non-closure is awful, but that tension of non-closure, if you can sit in that knowing that this work will never get done. And what are you going to do while you're here? That's why contribution is such a core value in all of my areas. That is for myself, contribution, and our family. Like, we don't have chores at my house. This is contribution. We have a family value of contribution, and you live in community, which is also a core value, 365 or 360 in my world.
Right.
Contribution also requires that you have self-awareness, because there are days where you can contribute more than others. There are days where you need to be contributed to. And that, to me, as a part of resilience, is the self-awareness. Because burnout is such a big deal. Giving more than you have is why we end up in debt, both financially and emotionally and energetically and as a community. And so I think for me, community has been such a huge part of resilience. I say every time we go to these Keystone meetings, and I hate meetings. Oh my God, all these people are going to all these, school board meetings and city, and I'm like, no, they are poorly run. The agenda sucks. There is I am not going to go to a 3-hour school board. I would rather, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And when I leave our meetings, it is hard to keep them at an hour and a half. And I always leave with more energy than when I got there.
Yeah.
So I look for, where am I going to invest my time versus spend it? But what's so interesting is, as a group, we have more resources. So not everybody has to go to every school board meeting, which, by the way, I did make survival kits.
For the school board meeting?
Yeah. So I have these little backpacks that are filled with like chocolate and crayons and a little like notebook and whatever. And then we bring them to the meetings, and then the next people who are going to the next round, they take the survival kit. It's so funny. But in community, we are fostering safety and security. And to me, that's resilience happens in community.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Survival backpack. Imagine little colored pencils in there for a little
the notes in those notebooks are hilarious.
Yeah, I bet.
It is like, we're going to come up with school board bingo. We haven't yet, but it's like, the more fun is a value. If it's fun, I'll do it. Yeah. But if you make me go to a 3-hour school board meeting with no chocolate and crayons, I am not going.
Not happening. Not happening. So yeah, how to find the joy in it, how to do it in community, building resilience with and through community. And, one of my favorite sayings is the collective is more effective. I think, it certainly takes our own work for sure. But when we want to create change, it's that work in community and that work as a collective, and that can take different forms over time. So as we get ready to start coming to a close, Heidi, I'd love to hear a little bit about what key lessons learned would you share with others who are trying to create change in their communities and region. And that could be at the individual scale or at the community scale. And knowing that the work that you're doing with the Keystone Collective, even though you're in your early days, it's built on lived experience. So yeah, how about those lessons learned you'd share with others?
I think for me, what has been the most surprising is that showing up is like the only thing you really need to do. Like
say more about that. That's awesome.
Like,
yeah.
The value of showing up is shocking, because we think like, I need to do this and I got to get this done and I got to do this and this has to happen, but you haven't even gone to a meeting yet, or you haven't even met with anyone yet. And there's pressure to figure it out. Yeah. When you're in community and you're in a collaborative space and you respect one another and you like each other, it's not required, but it's
very helpful.
There is this like synergy that happens where it's the sum is greater than the parts.
Yeah.
And showing up And in the early days, I was like, oh my God, is anybody going to show? Like, is this going to work? What are we even doing? We didn't have a name. We didn't have values. We didn't have our norms. Like all of that is developed, which is, I feel really excited about that.
Yeah.
But it is surprising how much leadership you have to bring to the table just by showing up. And I said it at a couple of early meetings. I'm like, apparently I'm an adult. I don't know when that happened, but like,
I guess
when I show up and I risk, because sometimes it is a risk to be seen. And this group, it's a mixed age group, which I love as well. And there are people in here who are community leaders that I respect. And it's like, ooh, should I be quiet? And it's like, this is a safe space to show up and share who you are, and trust that if you need to get checked, you will. And we have our norms around consensus. We have our norms around what happens during conflict. I'm shocked at what happens when you just show up. Showing up to school board meetings, amazing. Just be in the room. We talk about it. You're not in the room to be a disruption. You are in the room to be an interruption of the narrative that is harmful. And interrupting from a sacred space is important. When Mike shows up in a room and he's the only Black man in the room, it's disruptive to some people. What I want is for their eye line to be interrupted. Like, oh, okay, it isn't just a white town, right? So showing up, I'm shocked at the value of showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Showing up and being present.
Yes.
Also, not checking out.
And we also have that idea of if you're here and you showed up and you can't give 100%, fine. You're able to say that. You're able to say, like, today is tough. Equity work is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
But it is life and death.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the ultimate privilege to not do the work. It is if you believe that equity work is someone else's work to do, that's privilege.
Yeah.
And your unexamined, potentially unconscious privilege puts people who I love at risk and people who you love at risk.
Yeah. So that awareness, showing up, awareness, being willing to step into the difficult places. Yeah. What else, Heidi, would you share? Either feel free to take this in either direction about what you're excited about in community, or, the words of wisdom that you want to echo on to others, or that you wish you had heard 5 or 10 years ago. So what makes you excited, or words of wisdom, or both? Feel free to weave it in there.
I think it's really important. I wouldn't have been ready to do this work 5 years ago, for sure. My small, just from a place of like energy. Yeah. But I really think that what I would want to share is, don't ask someone else to do work you're not willing to do.
Yes.
If you have a set, so like my clients, I don't ask them to coach with me unless I have a coach, right? Like I wouldn't be coaching unless I'd been coached. Yeah. I don't really require anything. But I won't invite you into something that I haven't myself done. And I think that's really important. Like the values, if you come to my studio right now, the values are on the wall. If you come into my house, the values are on the wall. When you come to the collective, the values are like right there. I live by that. I don't teach anything that I don't live by. That's a big deal, because there's a lot of crap online when it comes to coaching. There's a lot of great marketing with no follow through that drives me bonkers.
Yep. Noise.
Absolutely nuts.
Noise. Yep.
A little frustrating, but I think what, especially like winding it back to resilience, honor where you are. I think that's a big deal. I think honoring where you are, because at different seasons of life, you'll have different things to give. You'll have different areas of expertise. Like the work I do now, 30, it would have been dumb.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have listened to me. Well, you should have, but I wouldn't have been saying the same thing. Yes. But I think if you're looking at your community and you're like, God, someone should do something about that. Go write someone on your forehead and go look in the mirror. Yes. Because if that idea came to you, you are probably the one that is gifted to bring that forward. I was never going to be a part of this like public equity work, no, I felt like it was going to put a target on Mike's back. And we have a truck that drives by our house with a Confederate flag, and he's been called names, and he's been, followed at the grocery store in our little town. Like, there's some microaggressions and macroaggressions. And I was like, no, this puts us in danger. Yeah. And we can't not do it. This work needs to get done. And who better? And you don't have to know what you're doing to start. You just have to know why you're doing it. The structure will come. It will. The structure will come. But if you're like, God, someone should do whatever. Hello, someone.
There's the mirror. There's the someone. There's a small town I love in Southwest Virginia called St. Paul. And there was a wonderful sign at the baseball diamond that said, if you have a complaint, then go ahead and sign up to help fix it. That basically invited people. If you find something challenging, then you are the one to help create the work to create the change for it. So
I just saw something online similar to that was like, I wanted to ask God why he would let people be hungry and let people, be hurting, and why he wouldn't do something about it. But I was afraid that he would ask me the same question. And I was like, oh my God.
Showing up.
Show
up.
And
Yeah.
so there's such a compounding effect of imperfect action.
Say more about that.
Like, you don't have to know how to do it.
Yeah.
Do it really badly for long enough and you'll get good.
Yeah. And
like the first couple of meetings, we had no idea what we were doing. And Mike and I were just like, okay. And then I realized like, oh, I need to bring the structure. Like, Mike's the visionary. I'm the structure. Right. I had to own my own leadership and risk being seen and risk feeling like a know-it-all. That was always like the limiting belief. Like, if I'm a know-it-all, I won't be loved. I am expected to be that in this group. It's celebrated, like, good job on that. And so when the things that make you feel vulnerable are celebrated, you are in the right group. Yeah. I've never said that before. That's real.
Beautiful.
That's real, don't you think?
Owning it. Yes. Yes. In all the ways.
Own your obvious.
And
that's what we say in my Lead from Within. Own your obvious.
Own your obvious. I love that.
Oh my gosh. Can we talk forever?
Yes, we can. And I'm so excited that we have a chance to continue our conversation soon. So, so much goodness here in this conversation today, and lessons learned. And I also just wanted to lift up, the vulnerability, and also, being okay with not knowing, as we start the work. That's hard and it's brave. And I often say, I'm going to get it wrong, especially in my work with community. I'm going to get it wrong, and that's okay. And as we normalize not being right, then we can shift together. It creates that space and opening to shift together. So
also create space to have other people join the conversation, because they might know. Yeah, admitting that you don't allows for other voices. And that is how we get harmony. Otherwise, it's just one boring note.
Yeah.
No one wants that.
And even different octaves. And we didn't even know different harmonics were possible, and all the things, all those.
And syncopation. There's a lot of syncopation.
So much. So Heidi, you mentioned earlier a little bit, but tell folks again how they can find you and learn more about your work, please.
Love that. Thank you for that opportunity. So the easiest way to get a hold of me is on social. I'm at Heidi Metro for everything. I do have a show that Christine will be on called Strategies with Soul. That's on YouTube. And you can always hit me up at email, Heidi@thenewNextLevel.com, or go to HeidiMetro.com and learn more about how we can work together. So
great. Awesome. Well, we'll include all those beautiful links in the show notes and the website. So Heidi, thank you so much for taking the time to join today. I greatly appreciate it. And what a wonderful conversation. So thanks for joining the We Rise.
So fun. Anytime I'm in. I loved it. Thank you.
Well, I would love that.